Hey, yeah, thank you for coming in. You really have a marvelous background. What the audience doesn't know yet, but you're still a high school student. But what you've done already would be amazing for a notable global researcher, um, and even though you're still in high school. So it's quite remarkable what you're doing and what you're continuing to do. Okay, so thank you for coming in to do this interview.
Thank you so much.
So now this is a question that may be a little bit harder for you to answer, but you got this remarkable history, and we'll mine into some of this history over this interview of accomplishment, contribution, doing great fundamental science, but always with this kind of practical lens where you're developing solutions that can be deployed. You're very entrepreneurial as well, and you're willing to, go out into the outlier regions in your research in AI, machine learning, and things like that. So it's really, really remarkable what you're doing. So what were the inflection points in your life that led you to who you are today? And typically what I say to people is when you're 3 or 5 years old, it could be when you're in teens, early adult, but you're still in high school. So in the time frame you've been doing all of this, what were those three inflection points? And it could have been a school mentor or something that happened in the family, etc. What are the three things that are leading you on this remarkable journey and will continue to do so?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And yeah, I think I actually have a very accurate answer to that. And it's quite unconventional from my perspective because a lot of people have some kind of one point where their life changes or they're inspired to do something. But in my case, it was really interesting. So the first time when I entered high school, so my high school is very competitive in terms of, extracurriculars and the competitions that a lot of students take part in. And when I entered high school, I saw a lot of my seniors, uh, getting all these flashy gifts and having this own status in the school in front of teachers and in front of all the juniors. So, and I sort of wanted that attention, which was kind of like a wrong thing at that point. But if you look at that thing from a 13-year-old's point of view, that could have been something that any teenager would have wanted. And I'm still a teenager, so it's quite contradictory, but still. So I kind of wanted that popularity, I'd say, when I first began getting into STEM. And that's why I kind of chose something that I was not really passionate about. I started working in biochemistry and I actually developed a really beneficial product for underprivileged communities. It's called HEPA-Ease. That's the same uh, product that we are still working on. It's a $2 paper-based strip for detecting early liver diseases. And it turned out pretty great. We got a lot of international recognition, but then after all of these recognitions, I kind of realized that I was wanting the wrong thing. I was chasing the wrong path. I actually didn't want to do what I was doing at that point. And then I realized that okay, I need to change. I need to have something that I'm really passionate about. And that's when I actually got into combining my skills in biology and chemistry that I honed over 1.5 years, and then using my passion for computer science and data science, and then combining those to develop a software for detecting metastasis early that recently was presented at world's largest pre-collegiate science fair. It's called International Science and Engineering Fair in the category of computational biology. So it's definitely not any specific point. It's kind of like a journey where I have realized where I was strong. And I'm still learning and how to move ahead. Now I think I want to develop a long-term career in combining my skills in data sciences along with statistics. So hopefully I'll look into that in my college. But yeah, it's still a long journey. I'm still 16 and there's a long way ahead.
So what I'm hearing is you enter a very competitive school. So I'll go back to that. What makes your school competitive? And we'll talk about that a bit. And you enter your junior year or freshman year, I guess, and you
Yeah,
look around, you see these really popular students, but these really popular students are the ones that are getting awards and entering these competitions and things like that. So you think, gee, that's really
yeah.
interesting. So you know what? I'm going to you. I'm kind of sort of pretending I'm you. You thought that, well, maybe I'll take on some of these challenges and see if I can challenge myself. And you did. You challenged yourself, and you entered different contests and you won and things like that. And I'll park the ICEF one because I know that one because I used to judge it over a period of
Oh,
years
okay.
as
That's
well.
that's
So
that's really nice.
so yeah, so I'm familiar with it. So what got you interested in like computer science and biology and chemistry and biotechnology and bioscience. I mean, what got you interested in that? Is your family oriented that way? Was it an uncle in your family or something like that? Or an early teacher prior to you going into high school? Well, what got you interested in science?
You got it. Specifically science, I'd say I wasn't really very interested in science, to be very frank. It was specific incidents that got me interested into how these things happen. And I'm very fascinated by cancer, to be honest, and I'll talk about that why. So I did this summer program in my freshman summer where I met the project partner that I did HEPA-E's with, the one that won at ISEF. And well, when we were talking about, our families and our backgrounds, yeah, a simple thing came up, and he told me that his dad was diagnosed with fatty liver disease, which was later the disease that we started working in. And I was just really interested about it because he told me that his dad didn't have any symptoms or anything of that sort, and the only way that he found out that he had fatty liver was due to a mandatory health checkup that his insurance company required for him to do. And when I got back home from the summer program, I told my parents about this. Okay, so yeah, this is my experience. And I talked to this guy and he told me about fatty liver. It's a really interesting disease. And that's when I found out that a lot of my relatives, a lot of my dad's colleagues, friends, my mom's friends had the same disease as his dad's. And that really kind of instilled a fear in me that this can happen to anyone. And I think that's how I got into science for the first thing, and then when you talk about computer science, I think that was back when I was in middle school. I think seventh or sixth grade, back when COVID really started. Our online classes ended by noon, so I really had nothing to do. So I just started, browsing these online courses on YouTube, and yeah, I was just really interested by how computers work. I think that's a really common thing for a lot of people, but what I think differentiates my perspective in this is that I use my skills to develop practical solutions rather than just doing, research. I actually told you about this at the conference itself in Prague, that I try to do research that is actually beneficial and you can translate the research and the product that you develop into actual impact by marketing it, by making it a actual tangible product that a lot of people can use. And that's why my interests are really interdisciplinary. I really like science, but at the same time, I'm equally invested in business and finance so that you can impact as many people as you can through the power of science and business combined. So, yeah,
So this would be in India, right? Uh,
yeah.
and so is your family then oriented in this way as well, so that you had an environment that was conducive to this kind of thing?
Uh,
Is that enabled or helped you in some way?
Not really, because my dad is from a business background and my mom's a teacher, so I didn't really have that scientific background. But what I really had was my school support, because as I said, my school is really invested into STEM and extracurriculars, so they really helped me provide connections to all the top universities in India and the labs, and also provided us with a lot of academic support when it came to working on our STEM projects and at the same time managing courses and classes. So yeah, I think my school really helped me, the high school that I'm studying at right now. So yeah, I think I didn't have a background in the family, but my high school became like my second family. My mentor, who's my chemistry teacher, he really helped me get through all of these things. So yeah, props to him.
So let's get into your school in more detail because lot of people in my audience aren't from India, so they're not familiar with the education
Okay.
system, what that's like, and they may have sort of an impression of India that's old, right? And not
Yeah.
realize that India has really progressed a lot, and is a leader in many areas now, things like that. And the predicted journey for India is very, very positive. So you grew up, it sounds like you grew up in what would be considered a middle class sort of Indian family, or
Uh,
that's sort of
I
get
think
that.
yeah, kind of like upper middle class, I'll say, because I had a lot of privileges that a lot of people in India don't have. So I'll be very frank about that. But yeah, you can say that. Yeah,
So you grew up in a family that had means and capabilities in India, and then you got into a special school that was very competitive. Can you describe this school? So in India, then we don't really have this in Canada, but it sounds like in India you got special. Is it like a private school or is it a
yeah,
public school? But
it's the private school.
but it's like a magnet school. In other words, you have to apply to get in. You have to be a good student. That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of educational boards in India, like the systems that you have to study through. So, uh, most schools in India, I don't know if you are familiar with it, but there's this examination in India called JEE, is a joint entrance examination for getting into topping in universities, and it's purely based on your scores in physics, chemistry, and maths. And it's very toxic, in my opinion, because it's just focusing on your academics that you do, but very less schools, especially in tier one and tier two cities, very less schools focus on extracurriculars and developing students as a person rather than what they are in terms of grades. And I think my school is one of those schools. The educational system in my school is the same standard system that's followed all over India. It's called CBSE. It's the government administered system, but it's a private school. And yeah, you have to be a decent student in terms of academics if you want to progress through high school. Otherwise, yeah, you'll probably be dropped out. And it's not a mandatory thing to, pursue extracurriculars, but it's highly encouraged. All the teachers are really supportive. In case you have to travel for a competition or you have to take some extra time off your classes, they'll give you the extensions for the assignments. They'll give you extensions for your tests or your exams. So in those terms, it's really supportive. And as I already said, they give you a lot of meaningful connections because a lot of top doctors, businessmen, and all of these people's kids also study. So there's kind of like a network in the school itself that's nurtured. And so it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship between the teachers and the students. So yeah, that's how a lot of students have succeeded from our school, and the results are pretty great as well.
Right. So that's a great environment then, because you have
Yeah,
access, right? You have access to great facilities. You have great access to great teachers that will be there, and access to that community to get to reach out to universities and researchers that are out there. So that would help quite a bit. Okay, so you're in this school, and you weren't really interested initially in the science aspects, but you grew to be interested more and more, though you
yeah,
were early on interested in computer science, right? Because you had free time and you started exploring, and now you're combining all of those elements. And you met a friend who had in their family a health challenge, and that got you interested into that health challenge because when you talk to your
yeah,
family, you realize that health challenge in your friend's family, you also found it in your family.
Yeah,
and that really stirred your curiosity to do kind of do some additional research in this area. So you started then researching this. Can you, in a simple way, describe this area of research? Or what is it? What is the issue in this area? And then what was your solution? And then we'll talk about some, part of your journey where you been in different contests and things like that.
sure. So the field that I used to work in my freshman and sophomore years, it's biochemistry and engineering, and the disease that I worked on was non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's a really lethal disease even in 2025. 30% of world's population is affected by it, but more than half of them don't even know that they have the disease, mostly because it's asymptomatic and there are mostly no changes in your lifestyle. You won't notice anything until it progresses to liver cancer, cirrhosis, or fibrosis, and that's what makes it really dangerous, in my opinion. And what me and my teammate did, we basically developed a really portable paper-based test strip, which uses your urine as a biofluid and detects two chemicals in the urine for detecting this disease in 15 minutes, compared to other diagnostic methods that exist in the market at this point, which are extremely expensive for many people in underprivileged communities to afford or even have access to. And this test costs only $2 to $3. And most importantly, any layman can use it. They don't need any expert guidance because it's just literally just dropping 2 to 3 drops on the sample pad, and boom, you get your results in 15 minutes. It's based on a simple color change that happens. So yeah, it's a really beneficial product, and we hope to launch this in the market by the end of this decade.
Um, by the end of the decade, so that's quite a few years. So what's preventing it from being launched sooner?
It's mostly because of funding limitations. Another thing is because even I have been involved in a lot of other personal projects. So yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I think is funding limitations. Even though we had a lot of international recognition, that would be the main thing. And another thing would be I moved cities last year. I moved to Mumbai for my further education. The last 2 years of high school. So that kind of split me up from my old high school. So that was another reason. So yeah, hopefully we can start working on it again.
So where would you place it from a competitive standpoint? Are you saying that right now throughout the world, there's nothing that can match it?
As far as my knowledge is, there are a lot of research papers that have been published highlighting urine as a non-invasive biofluid that can be used for early detection of such diseases which do not have any symptoms. But the only problem that I think exists is that people are not willing to go and do these tests. That's mainly because of lack of awareness. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of research and maybe a lot of unpublished products are still there at a lot of places around the world. But the only problem is that they're not public enough, they're not publicized enough, they don't have enough marketing to reach everyone around the world. So that's what I think my goal is to break by increasing awareness. And that's why while we were working on this project, we also used to conduct a lot of local awareness drives through the local Interact Club that I was a part of by sponsorship of Rotary. So that was really helpful as well. So yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that I'm trying to focus on with HEPA.
So you have this project, and can you talk about some of it was this project then that you were, uh, I guess there were local competitions in India, and you placed or were a finalist or won. And then that puts you in contention to go to the International Science and Engineering Fair, right? ISEF.
Yeah,
Can you describe that process of going through these different competitions within India, how that led to ISEF, and then what that experience was at ISEF? Because ISEF is very
sure.
famous.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So in India, the way it works is that firstly you have to submit your research project through an online system. The national fair that sends projects from India to ISEP is called IRIS. It's called Initiative in Research for STEM. It's called IRIS National Fair. And almost more than 3,000 projects are submitted through the online system. It goes through the Indian Scientific Review Committee, and out of those more than 3,000 projects, 100 are shortlisted to be presented at the national fair that happens every year in New Delhi. And out of those 100 research projects across the 21 categories, 20 projects move on to represent India at ISEF. So it's pretty competitive. The acceptance rate or the success rate is less than 1%. So yeah, it's a very competitive process. And the experience at ISEF, I've been to ISEF twice, once in 2023 when it was in Dallas and 2 weeks ago in Columbus. So both the experiences were pretty nice. It's always a great opportunity to meet people from 70 plus countries and all of these amazing people. So yeah, it's something that I cannot put into words because it's such a really great experience, you know. So yeah, but it was a really great experience in my opinion.
So, what I'm hearing then is within India, there's an online platform system where you could submit projects, and 3,000 get
Yeah,
submitted, 100 get shortlisted. Out of the 100, 20 then get selected to go to ISEP. And because you're representing India, then India, the government would probably stand behind the
sponsored. Yeah,
20.
yeah,
Yeah, and because India is a 1.4 billion population, it definitely is one of the top countries now. And so when you get 3,000 and that's winnowed down to the top 100, then from there to the top 20, the Indian projects will be of some significance because you have so much to draw from. It's like other very populous countries. You know, when you have projects that make it to the finals, they're they're
yeah,
they're quite interesting. And the LANS, the scientific review board in India that would look at these would be quite prestigious, and they would do a thorough job of their due diligence meaning checking to make sure that this is really high quality work,
yeah.
and they would look for that it's novel. So that's an important part of the judging process. They look to make sure it's novel. Look to make sure that there's something tangible there that can be utilized. For some
Really
reason,
sorry. I think there's a power cut here.
yeah. So, and then what they do is they look for a novel and they look to make sure that there's some kind of practical solution out of this as well. But, some commercializability or some solution, even if it's not commercial in open source, but some ability that can address a problem, a real problem, and then there's a solution for it. How did you do then at ICEP? So you've been there twice, and then you'll probably be there again. Um, what was that like, and how did you do at ICEP?
Yeah, definitely. So the first time I was at ISA was as a rising sophomore, back to 2 years ago. And the category that I competed in was biochemistry. And I think it's a very different category to which I competed this year. I did place second in my category, and I won the special award from USA for global health improvement. So that was a really great experience. This year, I competed in computational biology and bioinformatics, which is again a combination of computer science and biology to develop something uh, that uses both the techniques in both the fields. This year, my project was in developing a software for detecting early metastasis in colon cancer using data sets that are unlabeled of the biopsy. This year, unfortunately, I couldn't place in my category, but nonetheless, it was a really great experience. I had a lot of learnings from the competition itself, and yeah,
I mean, that's congratulations. Now, keep in mind that for 2 years now, you made the you won in India basically to be able to be sent to ISEP, right? So and to be sponsored for ISEP for 2 years in a row, and because you're still a student, then you could qualify perhaps even one more year. and you placed
Yeah.
second the first year, which is pretty good. The reason I mention this is because I judged for a number of years there. And
Okay.
for a couple of years, I judged representing ACM, Association for Computing Machinery, and we gave out a prize. And
Yeah.
then I judged as an investor, and we gave out a prize as well. So and you go onto the main stage when we give out our prizes and things like that. Um, but it's really the best talent in the world. It's considered the most prestigious international award system.
Yeah.
And so for you to make India finals and then to be set representing India would be a considerable achievement. And then, in your first attempt to place second is pretty good. And then the second time you didn't place, but still just to be selected because these are the best in the world going to that event, right? So, because there's a lot of prejudging to get there. So again, congratulations. But it was in two different topic areas. So one was in the sort of the more kind of the biomedical bioscience area, and then the second one was more the computational biology. Do you think that are you eligible for another year or?
Yeah. Actually, I've been to the national fair for 4 times before this year, and yes, I am eligible next year. So yeah, I'll hopefully do it again. And the first time I did it in eighth grade, and I think I'm the only student from India who has qualified for the national fair 4 times in a row. So I think that is something. I did it from eighth grade till up till 11th grade. That's last year. I won there 3 times. The first time it was Broadcom Masters. I'm pretty sure you've heard of it. It's like the junior middle school competition, similar to ISEF. And yeah, I'm also eligible next year for ISEF. So hopefully,
So you've now done 4 times, and this could be a fifth time. So that's pretty good.
hopefully.
The Broadcom one, did you meet Henry Samueli by any chance? Or
No, actually, because it was during the COVID year, I could not go in person. So, but I did win the coding with commitment special award that year in 2022.
so that's remarkable. And you've also done internships at different universities. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. So the first time it was through a research program that I did it in my sophomore summer. It was under a University College London PhD graduate. And that year, again, that was the first time that I actually worked in a computational biology project that was trying to find novel therapeutic targets for lung cancer. And the next summer, as a rising junior, I worked at UC Santa Cruz's Baskin School of Engineering, working on plasmonic biosensors using computational methods for developing early detection methods for liver diseases, specifically fibrosis last summer. And this upcoming summer, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be at Harvard Med School, interning under Professor Gil Alterowitz, working on another computational biology project through the Research Science Institute. It's called RSI. It's a pretty prestigious summer program. I'm pretty sure you would have heard of it. So, yeah.
So now because my audience are really curious about things that can sort of change the world in dramatic ways, can you talk about, one, two, or three interesting areas that are amazing and that have your interest and you think could be solved?
Definitely. The first one is probably the most common one. It's AI and how AI works. It's a really interesting field. So it's something called black box AI. It's about decoding how AI makes decisions. So the way neural networks work is it's through a lot of hidden layers on their decision making. It's really interesting on how they decode patterns in the data sets that we aren't unable to see. And and if we could decode how AI is trying to learn these patterns, it would be really game-changing knowledge in the industry because after that we'll be able to train AI in ways that's I think remarkable because after that we'll be able to eliminate biases that happens in a lot of data sets based on regions and a lot of various factors that creates a lot of outliers and decreases the accuracy worldwide. The second field would probably be cancer. Uh, Even though it's a very slow progressing field, if you're able to achieve any progress in the field of cancer, it's definitely, even if you, I'm pretty sure you've been to ISEF a lot of times and you must have seen almost a lot of, almost I think 10% of projects in all the categories are about trying to improve the stance in cancer across fields in some ways. And it's always really nice to, take small efforts to in our battle against cancer. We still haven't found the very accurate cure to cancer when it reaches incurable stages. It has happened to my grandmother. That's how I started working on this computational biology project, and that through metastasis. So I think that's another field that I think people should take initiative in if they're interested in biology through any sorts. And the third one would probably be, in my opinion, again, it would probably be climate change. That's another big issue that a lot of us neglect, probably because we are not still facing the effects of climate change. But in my opinion, it's one of the biggest problems that we are facing today. For example, for the first time in history, India has not been facing the extreme summers that it has been used to. Rather, we are facing early monsoons from the last month. So it was a really interesting phenomenon that even I noticed because generally through the whole month of May, we have, all these scorching temperatures of above 100 and 110 Fahrenheit. But this time it's really rainy, it's monsoon, it's chill, it's cold. So that's really interesting. So I think these three fields are something that are really remarkable. And if progress is made in these fields, it would be a great benefit to the whole of humanity in my opinion.
Okay, so let's let's mine these three topics in more detail. You talked about AI machine learning right now. It's opaque. You can't see what's happening. They are using sparse autoencoders, so you have some kind of an idea how it's activating in the latent spaces and things like that. Because
Yes.
you're getting these systems to do reasoning, chain of thought, tree of thought reasoning, and you're asking the models to kind of explain what's happening, then you get some transparency into what the patterns are, what it's doing while it's going through the reasoning. So you have DeepSeek. They have their R1 model they released quite a few months ago, and then they've updated it in June, which I think is interesting. Probably maybe matching, perhaps even exceeding the O3 capability. And then you have OpenAI with O3, they've already released O4, and they're talking about some kind of five, which will combine all the capabilities of the other models, and you don't have to select a model. It'll auto select. There'll be some kind of orchestration level. You have Google. They have embedded their Titan capability in their models, which is like a memory architecture. So that's already being infused into like Google 2.5 Pro. Um, and if you look at the deep research capabilities of Google Gemini or Anthropic or at OpenAI, they're agentic, right? They can call up tools. You can give it a problem. They'll call up other maybe almost like sub agents, like a mixture of experts kind of capability. They'll even launch code to work on a problem. So they're definitely agentic in that, and they'll kind of reason through as they do sort of meet interim goals to ultimately solve their target goals. You have Sakana. They have their AI scientists. They've now released the AI scientist version 2. That's the automate scientific discovery. And then they just came out with a new paper maybe 2, 3 days ago on Darwin Goidel, where it can do coding, but it actually can also self-improve on the coding. So it codes. They test. They get the system on its own to kind of rank itself against some of the benchmarks, and then the system can make improvements on its own, and it's kind of a virtuous circle. And this self-improvement on its own is really interesting. Um, there's the Kahn model, the Kolmogorov-Arnold model, which is using functions rather than sort of weights, and then which has a lot of promise. The only problem is right now there isn't hardware to support it. You have NVIDIA launching a lot of different work in areas. I mean, there's a lot of work going on. So I'd like to mine what you're saying on the opaqueness, not the ability to look into the black box. Um, are there any pieces of research, or I should even bring up Jan LeCun. He's working on a joint embedding predictive architecture, so he doesn't believe that LLMs are ultimately the solution. He's working on these world models where they can working on things like time X and X plus one, but from a more of a holistic standpoint, and he calls that JEPA. And there's the Quen model from Alibaba. There's just so much work going on. Um, and so, in your on your perspective, from the things that you like to see on the AI side, um, what is really intriguing to you, and that where you think there could be some significant outcome, and that would lead us to kind of like a fundamental shift. It's like if you went back 10 years, if you were to show what we have today in 2025, people would have said that's AGI. They would have said we already have AGI. So that whole definition of AGI, artificial general intelligence, is moving. So I'd
Yeah.
like to get your perspective on that opaque box, black box. What are the areas of machine learning AI that you think are intriguing and that you like to explore further, and then make some predictions of where you think that's going to go?
So, definitely, I think what you said, I completely agree to the points where, there has been a lot of progress when it comes to avoiding and eliminating the opaqueness that a lot of deep learning models are having in today's models and in applications. But in my opinion, when it comes to, the intriguing things that are happening, I think a lot of experience that I personally have, it's in terms of the resources that are available when it comes to, using these applications. For example, when I was starting off with my current research project, I wanted to use, GPUs for running my deep learning models, but I really didn't have any access to the high performance GPUs, and it was really expensive. So I think a lot of people have very brilliant ideas, and they just don't have the, access to using those resources for developing or even trying to implement those ideas. Because, in my opinion, institutions work in a very structured way, which is why they are often restricted by many factors that are maybe unseen. They don't even realize that they're restricted by certain factors, which also, to my opinion, to my perspective, stops innovation. Definitely, there are a lot of wings at these institutions, at Google, at Apple, at Microsoft, that are specifically designed for innovation, but still, I think there are a lot of students, a lot of freelancers, a lot of people around the world who have a lot of brilliant ideas. They just don't have the access and resource still, even after such liberalization of AI and technology. So I think if that was being able to, we are able to distribute the access to GPUs, for example, because now at this point today, the only way that you can probably work on high performance deep learning models using GPUs is through Kaggle, which is an open source database for data sets, and they give free access to NVIDIA's GPUs. to for a limited amount of time. That's like I think 1 week. And that was the amount of time frame that I had to work on my project. And the way I found a way around it was I made 3 accounts on Google, and then I tried to kind of hack the system. I coded my deep learning model 3 times using 3 different accounts for 3 weeks consecutively until they kind of like noticed, and then they banned my account on Gaggle, which was kind of funny. But still, I think liberalization is something that we still need to work on. I think I'll probably work on this when I graduate college, and I get into policy, and trying to liberalize AI and all these resources. But at this point, I think I'm kind of in a very limited resource setting. But definitely, once I grow up, I have more connections, more resources. I'll surely work on this.
That's interesting. Were you able to, Chaco, I did an introduction to Chaco, and then he has those different colleges in India, and he has 35 research labs with 300 PhDs. Were you able to do further any kind of dialogue with that group at all?
I did try to follow up like I think 5 or 6 times, but I think he's pretty busy, so that didn't work out. But that's all good.
Yeah. Um, he does have some great scientists there working with him. As I mentioned, 300 of them, right? And they do have access to more computational resources than you have. If you can get more access, I'm starting to understand what you're saying is that, there's a lot of people like yourself that have capability. You're willing to work hard, but you don't have the computational resource to carry on your own additional research. Uh, and if that could be democratized and made more widely available, then you'd have much more innovation, right?
Yeah,
So that's a limitation for you, and being able to run your own models and do your own research. So that's an interesting issue, and so that's good to know. It'd be great if Chaco or others could unlock some of the capabilities they have. So, and you talked about cancer. So there's a lot of work in AI and applying it to, let's say, regions that are, where they're kind of disordered regions, where you can therapeutics won't bind to them correctly. So there's a lot of work with AI for small molecules in AI, uh, peptides in AI, signaling, fragments in AI, using AI to sort through all of that. Have you looked at that at all, or is that an area of interest? And of course, it applies in cancer as well.
yeah. It's a really interesting field actually. When we talk about along with peptides and proteins being used for developing better cancer therapeutics. There's a very interesting experience that I actually have with, there's something called CAD, that's called computer aided drug design, that a lot of big pharma companies are using for, developing faster drugs for cancer. And the one problem that I noticed, and a lot of researchers are also having at this point using AI or computational resources or in silico resources for developing drugs for cancer, is that even though we have achieved a very high level of accuracy in terms of using such resources for developing better peptide structures, better targeted therapeutics for cancer, the main problem comes with practicality and how well we are able to implement those structures that are developed through these AI structures. So I did one project during my towards the end of my sophomore year with the same project partner I did HEPA-E's with. We were really interested in how we can use computational resources for developing a drug for brain cancer. That was just kind of like a fun project that we did, kind of like a quest. How creative drug design works. There are a lot of steps that go through. You have to do molecular docking, you have to do ADMET analysis, basically a toxicity analysis for the drug that you develop. And the results were really interesting. So once we did the ADMET analysis for the drug that we developed through computational resources for brain cancer using the structures that we derived from all the secured databases, the ADMET analysis showed that the drug was highly infiltrated and would be 95% able to reach the target for the tumor and then cure it. But when we looked at the structure chemically and we showed it to our chemistry teacher, it was a really funny expression that he had because the structure in itself had carcinogenic what it's called benzene. So it had benzene molecules attached to the drug compound, which made the drug itself carcinogenic rather than being able to cure the the tumor cells. So in actuality, the drug was actually in itself toxic, then it would have been able to cure the toxic compounds, which are tumor cells in our body. So this was really interesting. And when we actually read about it and we talked to many more researchers in our city and abroad about the same issue, and they were like, yeah, that's actually the problem that why people are still investing millions of dollars in wet lab resources, developing drugs in the lab rather than, relying on in silico resources because cancer is a very notorious disease. I think, in my opinion, in biology, I personally do not like any other field other than cancer and oncology because the way cancer behaves, the way cancer develops, and the way cancer reacts to certain drugs is just fascinating and amazing. And it's a really interesting field that you still have to work a lot upon if you want to achieve a victory over cancer in the upcoming 30, 40, or 50 years, who knows?
So that's I mean, again, I can see then. I mean, through AI and this process, well, you find some kind of a novel solution, but when you actually look at this at the structure of this novel solution, then you find that there's all sorts of problems, a toxicity of that,
Yeah,
right? And that's where having an assay kind of component, a wet lab. So you can have the AI in silico ability, but unless you have a wet lab or an assay capability, then you need a kind of a 360 ecosystem debate to ascertain, is this something that's realistic? That's what you're saying, right? So you talked about some of the interesting areas, and we're down to our last few minutes. And I should check, do you have a hard stop in 10 minutes or
no, no, I have time. Yeah,
okay. Okay, so let's kind of go back to what we did, right? I asked you what were the inflection points in your life, and you talked about this journey with your friend, and it got you interested in um, bioscience and the medical aspects, and even to the point of being able to detect using urine, right, on a test strip, and to do with
yeah,
liver disease of some sort, right?
yeah,
And then you discussed how you have this abiding interest, not just in medicine because of this kind of family connection with and your friend's family connection, but you always had this curiosity about the computational biology and solutions. Um, and you developed skills in computational biology or computation and computer science and AI machine learning. And now and you've applied that to cancer as well, right? The computational side. You also discussed that through internships, you've done a variety of internships through different universities, including in India, you mentioned University College London, you mentioned in the US as well, the University of California, Santa Cruz, things like that. And you got another one upcoming with Harvard.
yeah,
And you're continuing with these internships. And the things with these internships is they're actually giving you research projects to work on.
yeah,
And you've indicated over the past 8 years, for example, you've won all of these. contest to work to be invited to these global contests. So you want India-wide contests to be invited to these global contests, like the Broadcom. You talked about ISAP multiple times. The ISAP, all of them really, really famous. And now you're going into you're in your senior year of high school. So you already would be now investigating universities you want to go to and kind of doing some outreach, right?
Yeah.
And so what are those results have been?
I mean, I am strongly looking at UPenn's MNT program. That's kind of like my dream program. It's called Jeremy Fisher Management and Technology Program. So it's a really interesting program, which is why it really fascinates me as well. You basically get a dual degree from Wharton School of Business as well as Penn School of Engineering. So you basically what I'm trying to do is so by the time I graduate both the skills, I have bachelor's degrees in both the fields, and then I'll be able to apply those skills into real life. So yeah, I'll be applying this fall, upcoming August, September. So hopefully I get in early to UPenn. It would be really nice.
Okay, so and because we're getting into some communication difficulties, so so I'm going to repeat what you're saying, and that is right now you got a good conversation going on with the University of Pennsylvania, which is a really good school, by the way. It's quite famous
Yeah,
in the U.S. And then with the Wharton School, which is definitely one of the best schools in the world from a graduate business education standpoint. And you're saying that you're able to do a dual degree, one in engineering and then one from the business or finance side on the
yeah,
University of Wharton. And the reason that this interests you is because you're interested in the research, but you're also interested in business and finance too at the same time. So you
yeah,
have it effectively as a solution. Now I can see how that ties into your father. Your father was a business guy. So
yeah,
you always have this abiding interest in business, but you have curiosity and things like that, which fits in to your years of doing research, even as a young person in middle school and continuing through high school. So you can continue the research side, but combine that with the business and finance side to have solutions that are being utilized worldwide and make it sustainable. Did I capture that correctly?
yeah.
And so, have you been accepted then into University of Pennsylvania and things like that, or?
Not yet. I actually just entered my senior year, so I'll be applying in October. That's when I'll be submitting my application. I'm gonna be doing my early decision to UPenn, so hopefully then I'll get my decision by December. So yeah,
Yeah, though the whole kind of international students is changing and in the U.S., so that could present a requirement that you need another backup. So have you looked at backups outside the U.S.?
yeah, preferably UK. I've been looking at some colleges in the UK. Oxford is one of my top choices, so I'll be applying to the UK as well. But I think in terms of higher education, specifically college education, I think US has a lot more opportunities and a lot more resources compared to any other countries. So that still remains my top choice. But yeah, hopefully everything calms down. From the international students' perspective, uh, I, I I'm really hoping that there are not many more issues coming up, just like the Harvard case that has happened recently. And yeah, I think my top choice would still remain the US, solely because of the fact that there are so many opportunities and so many exposures that a student and anyone can get by coming to these top universities and prestigious institutions. So yeah, but I'm still looking at some backups in Singapore, in the United Kingdom. So yeah, but hopefully everything works out.
Yeah, I mean the Singapore NTU from a pure metrics standpoint is a really good school. There's also the National University of Singapore.
Yeah,
But from an engineering standpoint, there's some really good things happening at NTU. And because they're combining the research side with the engineering, and they actively have partnerships with industry, right? So in Singapore, then, are you looking at NTU or just the National University of Singapore, or which ones are you looking at there?
I'm looking at NUS, but the problem is that they have a really high bar for admissions for international students, specifically from India, because academically I think I'm pretty good, but they basically require you to have like near perfect grades, which is close to I'd say 4.0 GPA. Like out of a 4.0 scale, they'll probably have require you to have like 3.99, and I'm more like a 3.95 guy. So I'm not pretty sure if I'll be cut out for NUS or NTU, but I'll surely apply and take my chances. So yeah, but I'm mostly looking at NUS.
Yeah, the NTU, actually in electrical engineering, if you look at just pure performance ranking, NTU is what, number one in electrical engineering, and they're either number one or number two in computing science, things like that, and AI, and various other areas. They're definitely top ranked. So it's worth looking at from a translational research standpoint, and specifically
Yeah,
because they have a very strong business side together with the research side. And then Oxford, of course, is it's a really famous school. So you got some threads out there in discussions you're having globally with different schools. And then post graduation, what do you hope to do? Then get into industrial research, become a found companies. It sounds like you want to, you don't want to do just pure research. You want to do translational research. That's what it
yeah,
sounds like, anyways. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. After my bachelor's, I'm strongly leaning towards getting a master's in business administration, preferably again from either Wharton or Harvard. And after that, I want to get some work experience at some big pharma industry company, or basically some industry experience, so that I can gain some knowledge, because in my opinion it's extremely important to get industry knowledge and what's happening in the market and how these big companies work from a individual point of view, how these different companies work. And after that, I do want to start up my own business, preferably in the diagnostics industry, because I have my own research. By that point, I hope that I can pivot it into a tangible product that can be used, or get into consulting and provide these healthcare products to underprivileged communities at affordable cost. Uh, the path is still unclear, because now we are talking, I think, 10, 15 years down the line from today. It's probably 2034 or 2035, but whatever I end up doing, it's probably going to be me ending up starting up a business, not specifically a deep tech startup, the way the recent landscape has been, because you also must be seeing all of these new AI startups coming up, and it's kind of like a boom in the last few months. But I really don't want to go into that, but probably a niche business that has a long-term return, but at the same time giving a lot of impact on these communities that really need help, and does not account socioeconomic status, or their financial means to afford any healthcare services into the means. And then yeah, hopefully I can give them access to that. As I said, it's still a really unclear path, but yes, I am strongly sure that I'd be ending up doing this 10, 15 years down the line.
So just kind of summarize then, some of the research projects you've been interested in. You've been working on this in silico based EGFR targeted optimized drug for glioblastoma, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Multiform.
Glioblastoma multiforme. Yeah.
Yeah, aggressive kind of brain cancer. That's been an interest. Is that work continuing, or is that sort of paused right now?
Yeah, yeah, we kind of paused that because we didn't really get a lot of good results. So, and as I said, we did it as like a kind of like a side project, but yeah, it was a really great experience from a learning standpoint.
And then you, for a number of years, you were involved from 2022 to 2024 HEPA E's. And this is
Yeah,
where you were talking about, a significant portion of the population have this fatty liver disease, and a lot of people don't even know they have it until it
yeah.
becomes more serious. But you found biomarkers which could be detected in urine. And is that project, it sounds to me from our discussion, that project is sort of continuing. And you're thinking in the next 5 years, you'd like to maybe create a company out of it. So that's still continuing though, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like I'd say it's not ended, but it's kind of like dormant at this point because the project partner that I worked with, he's kind of more focused on giving one of those Indian examinations for entry into the Indian universities. So he's really occupied into studying for those examinations. And for me as well, I'm busy with my internships. RSI is pretty intensive, so I'll be busy. I'll be in Boston for 2 months, and then I'll have college applications and my senior year coursework. So hopefully next year, when I have like a 6 months gap before I start college, I'll look into what I can do with it because I'll have a lot of free time before college starts, and then I can try to restart and boot it up again.
Yeah, and another project you're working on is on targeted therapeutics for lung cancer and developing using RNA data and bioinformatic tools. And so that's kind of in process. But as you mentioned, you've got internships and exams and other things that you have to also pay attention to. So that's
Yeah,
kind of ongoing though, right?
yeah, that was more of like a I think review project that I did with a person who works as an associate principal scientist at AstraZeneca that developed one of the first COVID-19 vaccines. And yeah, I worked for this project under him during my sophomore year, and the research is complete. I did find some potential therapeutic targets that can be used. And at this point, I'm kind of trying to publish it through Elsevier's journals in bioinformatics. So that's under process, but that was kind of like a review project rather than a long-term research.
Yeah, you also have this DL-based framework for early cancer metastasis detection using
Yeah,
autoencoders.
that's the
And
current project.
yeah, associated with catheter labs, I should say, and developing a deep residual learning-based framework for detecting metastatic regions in colorectal cancer, whole slide images of minimal tumor data. So that's interesting. You're using autoencoders and CNNs and Python, right, with this work.
So for this project, this is the same project that I actually presented at ISEF 2 weeks ago. And the way this project works is that I have made kind of like a software for laptops and systems for detecting for detecting metastasis in colon cancer because the general convention is that that metastasis in cancer, which is essentially spread of cancer through to other organs in our body from the primary organ where cancer begun, happens throughout stages. And once that happens, cancer is essentially incurable. But in my opinion, that we can detect metastasis and the aggressiveness of tumor in its early stages itself. And that was my main hypothesis for this project. And the way I proved it is that I used unlabeled data sets. In the current research stance, all of the deep learning models that exist in the market and in the industry use labeled data sets for these whole slide images, which are essentially biopsy images of colon cancer for detecting metastasis or, just staging these cancer tissue slides. But what I did differently was that I didn't use any of these label data sets. I relied on a semi-supervised learning algorithm and I tried to analyze it through an autoencoder. And autoencoders, you must also be familiar that they are not used in medical spectrums a lot. And that's what I tried to explore with this project. I used autoencoders in this kind of like a medical spectrum, and I developed an algorithm for anomaly detection. So I fed my autoencoder with all the tumor images with no metastatic signatures, or I'd say anomalies. And after that, I fed a random data set of tumor tissues, which also included metastatic signatures and some metastatic slides, but they were not explicitly labeled. So what basically happened was that once that data set ran through the autoencoder, I basically generated kind of like a histogram with the frequency of reconstruction errors. So for those who don't know how autoencoders work, I'll give a very simple example. For example, if this is my phone, and the way autoencoders work, if this is a biopsy image, what it basically does is that it would try to bring this whole image of the cancer biopsy slide down to the smallest bits, the smallest pixels, and then it would try to reconstruct it as a mirror image of the same original image. So it basically tries to reconstruct uh, the biopsy slide. So the way this project worked was that because my autoencoder only had tumor slides, which was in this case normal data, the metastatic signatures were not reconstructed properly because the model has not seen those signatures. And then these specific slides had very high reconstruction errors. And that's what I termed as anomalies. And I said that, okay, so these are the metastatic signatures, which can be used for classification of tumor aggressiveness in early stages. And that's how I proved my hypothesis. But again, the only drawback that my research had that I didn't have any uh, validation from primary data sets. And that's what I'm currently working on.
Right. So you're working on the validation of this novel method that you've created using autoencoders, right, in CNN. And you got
Yeah,
this baseline model achieving 98.63 specificity, right? So that's actually pretty good.
yeah.
And it showed an MSE approximately 0.0033. So you got a lot of potential here. Now you're looking for validation, doing some additional work on the validation side. Is Cather Labs providing the kind of the funding to do this, or how's that happening?
Scatter Labs is actually the name of the whole project that I gave it. And the
Oh, I
software
see.
that I'm developing is called CatherNet. So yeah,
Oh, I
so it's kind of
see.
like a
That's your name.
startup, you can say. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, I get it. That's interesting.
yeah,
So I'm just let's see here. You're a co-founder and president of Affinity IT Club. Let's see, you're summer research at the India Institute of Science and Education research. You did a
yeah.
summer.
By the way, that's a summer program that I found my friend at. That was a summer program in my freshman summer. Yeah,
I see. And then you were a summer research intern at University College London. And then you did Civics Innovator Fellow at Civics Unplugged. Let's see here. Summer Entrepreneurship Program, Berlin Institute of Technology and Science, and Bioelectrical Engineering intern to University of California, Santa Cruz. Oh, I see here. Founder and CEO, Cather Labs, which is your name for this work on the autoencoder stuff, right? And the machine learning
yeah,
research intern at Bindwell, right? Based in San
yeah.
Francisco.
That's a
But
YC startup from San Francisco.
yeah, you're just doing that now, right? So,
Yeah,
accelerated pesticide research and development. So that's a lot of interesting work. I just want to see if we covered off anything here we didn't capture. You have the IRIS National Fair 2024, 2025 Grand Award winner in computational biology and bioinformatics. And this is for detecting potential metastatic signs in early stage colon cancer. That got you into the ICEF 2025. I met you at Futureport Youth. You were a Global Impact Award winner.
yeah,
That was in November of last year. And then Next Generation Foresight Practitioner, Young Voices Award. That was in 2024. And That was in the United Kingdom, the Single Sci Student Research Showcase finalist, and then the STEM Symposium and Indian Institute of Sciences. That was in 24. Iris National Fair 2024 finalist. Young Ideathon 2023, top 30 teams. TED Expo at the Indian Institute of Technology, first runner-up. Genius Olympiad finalist for HEPEAS. U.S. Agency on International Development, Global Health Improvement, second award. The Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair 2023, second grand award winner in biochemistry for HEPEAS. The Ideathon Indian Institute of Information Technology senior category winner for HEPEAS. Coding with Commitment Challenge by Broadcom. There's this one, right? Iris National Fair 2022 junior final and special award winner. So I think we covered off a lot of the things from the award standpoint. You're also interested in soccer, right? So, and you enjoy singing, right?
Yeah,
And of course, you're
yeah.
quite an active volunteer. Is there anything we missed in this, my kind of low sort of just summary of some of the things you're doing? You're busy.
No, I think we have covered pretty much everything. Yeah,
Okay, and then we also discussed where you hope to be. So you got applications at the University of Pennsylvania and Wharton School. Um, you got backup at Oxford and Singapore. You're thinking of doing work that combines both research but also business and finance and you would like to found your own company at some point. You've already doing that work somewhat already because you are the founder of like Cathar Labs and things like that. So you got some early instances of the entrepreneurship side and you're sort of continuing on that journey. So I guess what I'm hearing then is as you're going through college, you're going to be pretty busy though, studying at college. Are you still going to continue some of these other projects, like interning, um, your catheter lab kind of work, but maybe it's named something different? Or or you may find that at college you're going to be so occupied just in that your studies that you may not be to do as much of this kind of freelance that you're doing now.
uh, I strongly hope that I am able to continue these side projects because they're not just side projects, they're kind of like my passion projects that I'm doing because of some motivation that I had. For example, the current project that I am doing with Cater Labs, it's because my grandma had suffered something similar. She had metastasis due to colon cancer, and she passed away due to that. And that was one of the motivations why I started out. But I think only time will tell because I don't know how intensive the college coursework is gonna be. But definitely, whenever I do get time, I'll fully devote my time into these passion projects because I strongly hope that these projects and these projects that I'm trying to develop reach the people who need it the most because I have lived across many tier one and tier two cities, and even though I have had the privilege to most of the resources when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to food security, when it comes to getting the access to quality education. I've seen people who are denied these resources just because of their socioeconomic status, because they don't have enough financial means to afford these resources. So still, it's a long way. It's one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and everyone is trying to do their part in achieving small goals and small sub goals out of the 15 SDGs. So yeah, I hope I can contribute meaningfully to those through these side projects that I'm trying to do. So yeah, hopefully, but only time will tell.
Are you still in touch with the people with the Gen Zs that were there at Futureport Youth, like Maddie and
Yeah,
who's at
I'm
Stanford?
I'm strongly in touch with Sameh. I'm strongly in touch with Sameh
Summer.
Hani. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, he's studying at Columbia. Yeah.
But Maddie's also very active at Stanford, and he's only in his sophomore year, and he's already producing things globally, right? So,
Oh, okay.
have you it's worth reaching out to him. He's very, very active in research. Yeah, I mean, that's a
I actually wanted to talk to him. Yeah, but I didn't get the time, or unfortunately. But yeah,
it's to me, I think it's worth reaching out and saying, hey, why don't we do a Zoom call or something, and then be in regular contact with him. Maddie's got a great network at Stanford and other schools, and he's doing some really interesting research as well. So, and it would be worth it. I mean, Stanford's hard to get into as well, right? So,
yeah.
and they're very entrepreneurial.
But I
So,
think, yeah,
I mean, I can see some of his work tying in with your work. Or he could maybe point you to friends in his network. So grow your relationships network on the research, translational research side, right? Um, and
yeah.
leverage the relationship you formed at Futureport Youth, right? So this is our last question then. Aditya, what recommendations or questions you want to leave the audience?
I think everyone has, the one thing that I've learned over a lot of experiences through a lot of exposure that I've had, fortunately, over these years is that every person has their own unique experiences and their own stories to tell. And I think the one thing that people should ask themselves is how can they address problems that they're facing in their communities and personally what they are trying to improve and what problems that they face they can improve and use whatever resources that they have at their instant and use those to benefit even one person if they can, because it does not matter what the scale of your project or your product has, as long as it is benefiting even one person, your family, your community, or even your region. I think that's more than enough for trying to start up even the smallest of impactful projects. And I think that would be probably it. And I think I just have one curious question for you. I know I think this is like an interview for me, but I do have a question for you. It's kind of more like a very broad question, but I still wanted to ask it. What do you think you have learned over, I think past 30, 40 years of your experience across, so many fields, so many experiences that you've had? You've had so many connections, so many people you've met over your career of, I don't know, so many years, probably twice or thrice my age at this point. What are your, key takeaways and what do you feel as a person at this point after, growing so much through these experiences?
That's a really good question. So there's a number of sort of recommendations that I would give to the audience and give to you, right? But you're doing this already, so think translational, and definitely think interdisciplinary, and think combinatorial. So combinatorial meaning immerse yourself in so many different spaces and spend some quiet time every day thinking about how they connect and how they can amplify each other in novel and interesting ways, right? And that will improve your creativity and the ability to come with novel ideas and innovation, right? So, and combinatorial thinking also means don't just stay exclusive into a narrow community. Don't spend all your time with engineers
Yeah,
or scientists, or like you do. You have friends who are musicians and or who sing, who are in sports. I mean, there's pockets of all of this different kind of thinking, and if you get into this combinatorial thinking, it really does amplify what you do. So I would say I'll give you lessons I've learned. Another lesson
yeah,
is to spend. I mean, I spend 3 to 5 hours a day reading every day. but not reading. I don't read things that everybody reads. I tend to read what's on the outlier. What is on the edge? What are the new things that are coming up? And why are they interesting, right? And so, and I've been doing that since I was like 3 years old. So spend 3 to 5 hours reading, and I read about science and I read about innovation and investments, but I also read about art and music and culture and then continually try to combine all of these combinatory unique ways, right? I tend to read more what's current than what's past. And the reason is I want to formulate my own views rather than reading, the 10 lessons of some author who wrote something, 40 years ago. Right? I like to explore all of these different dimensions and then think of what are 10 new ideas, of how things can be done. Okay, so and continuing this journey is, relationships matter, and I've
Yeah.
learned that probably 98% of is the relationships. In other words, um, meeting and exploring ideas with people who are different than you, respecting who they are and their point of view. So always put yourself in the shoes of the other and spend time to understand that other's experience and respect that other's experience. And the key to discovery, the key to innovation, the key to pretty much every area is having relationships with others and understanding their point of view and treating each relationship as a treasure, right? So sometimes when I find that when people are really technical, they think that some people want to kind of isolate themselves and they don't believe that relationships are important. What I learned is relationships are actually more important than pretty much everything else, right? So, and treasure those relationships. And then when you do have relationships and you build those relationships, and then introduce those relationships to others as a gift to others. So on a regular basis, just say, you know what, I've got a good friend here. There's this new person I met, and just join them. Act as a facilitator to bridge to connect other people, and you'll find that's really useful in engaging and building communities and things like that. So building communities is really important and nurturing communities that are out there. And that 3.5%, there's this idea that 3.5% of any community can create systemic change. So if you continually are building communities, then you can influence the entire planet, or you can influence your family or a community or a school, because 3.5%, whatever that size of that community is, you can influence it in a positive way. And then on a regular basis frame. So I'm always framing, sort of creating goals for things 5, 10, 15 years into the future. And I'm always directing in a micro way. Um, when I used to teach programming logic, we used to call this stepwise refinement. So if you have a really big problem or a goal, big one, then always look at those micro adjustments to lead to that big goal. So I call that framing. I mean, I could write a book on so many of these kind of lessons that I've learned. So I would encapsulate your question into lessons. And then if you do those lessons to always work for good, tech for good, impact for good, putting the best interest of others, then ultimately the world will be better and you'll have some novel impact into that world.
No, that's really nice of you. And I think you have even implemented these lessons into your life. That's pretty evident because I still I really appreciate that you have introduced me to so many people and so many places where I could get opportunities and exposure from your end with whatever connection that you had. So I really appreciate it, and I think you're a really humble person. You are one of the most successful and humble persons that I've met yet. till in my 16 years of life. So it's a really big honor to, just have a conversation with you. So thank you so much for having me here.
Well, yeah, you're the inspiration for all of us, right? So I learned a lot from you, excuse me, and I've grown from this experience of interacting with you, and then I'm here to serve your goals and your life ambitions, and I'll do whatever I can to support that, right? So, and that's kind of one of my missions is that how can I serve them to achieve whatever they wish to achieve, as long as it's positive. So, thank you for taking the time. I mean, this interview is an hour and a half. It's one of the longest interviews I've ever done. And
Oh, okay.
so, so take care and continue on your journey. You're on a marvelous journey, and you definitely will. You already are made the world better. You made communities better. You've helped to create inspiration and to incentivize your network and the communities you interface with. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephen. I hopefully we stay in touch. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.